Have you always wanted to visit Japan but aren't sure where to start? On May 30th, the Japan Society of North California held an event titled Creating Your Dream Trip to Japan. During the event, Steve Pollock from Japan Society and Kazunori Kato from ANA shared travel experiences and recommendations, including tips on discovering hidden but can't miss highlights.
We're going to get started. So my name is Dewan Mercado. I am the program coordinator here at the Japan Society of Northern California. We are a nonprofit based in San Francisco, and we host a variety of programs throughout the year to strengthen the gap between the Bay Area and Japan. So some of the programmings we do revolves around high level, such as like med tech and AI regulation and politics, but we also like to do cultural events such as Japanese archery, taiko, and as well as we provide Japanese language classes as well, in person and online. So I know a lot of you wanting to go to Japan. Feel free, if you want to learn Japanese before going, to go to our website as well. Some of our upcoming events is we're going to have our Innovation Awards in July and Stanford University. We also have our annual gala in September in Hotel Nico. It's going to be Friday, September 27th. And we also plan to just have more culture events. I know I'm currently planning a kimono event for San Jose around June 30th. So again, we have a wide variety of events. Just to talk about today, we have Steve Pollock. He is the president of the Japan Society of Northern California. And we have Kazunori Kato, who's joining us on his personal just fan of Japan. He works for ANA, but today he's just here as a guy who loves Japan. He's going to tell us from a Japanese perspective about all the best places to go to in Japan. And so let's see. And then lastly, again, if you just joined, we had a Google form that we sent to everyone with questions. Thank you for everyone. We had an overwhelming amount of questions. If you didn't get a chance to fill out that form, please put your questions in the chat and we will try to get to it at the end. But without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Steve Pollock and he will introduce himself and Kazunori more. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Dewan, and welcome everybody to our first program in a long time about travel to Japan. And the idea for this program really came from lots of questions. One of those of you who know me personally know that one of my favorite pastimes is to give people advice about travel to Japan, things to see and do in Japan. I am really a passionate Japan traveler. I'm not a professional tour guide. I don't run tours, but I do have a lot of, I get a lot of joy from traveling around Japan. It's one of my favorite places to go and to talking to people about what they have seen and done in Japan. So thank you everybody for coming. And hopefully we'll have a chance towards the end of this program for people to share some of their own experiences. Let me also just reiterate my thank you to Kato-san from ANA. He's a friend of mine and a corporate client of a corporate supporter of Japan Society of Northern California, and he kindly agreed to come on and join this program and share some perspectives from sort of a Japanese point of view and answer some of those questions that I just didn't know the right information to be able to handle. So we really appreciate his time in coming today. So let me start. I'm going to share my screen here in just a second. And I'm going to go to one moment. We'll get set up here.
Okay, Steve, while you're preparing, let me just make a few comments. And hi, my name is Kazunori Kato. I'm assigned in the San Francisco San Jose office since last year. I'm quite excited seeing a lot of high interest traveling to Japan, looking over those questions. I am working in the Japanese airline, ANA. Since I'm also not a professional of the guiding around Japan, but let me try my best to explain how you would be able to enjoy the travel in my country, Japan. Thank you.
Thank you, Kato-san. I got my slides set up, so here we go. So for those of you who are wondering exactly what our itinerary is going to be today, here is what we're planning to cover. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Japan travel boom that we seem to be in the midst of right now. Some general thoughts about why I think Japan's such a great place to go, and I'm such a passionate advocate for people traveling to Japan. Then we'll go into some specifics about how to get to Japan, and once you get there, how to travel around and see the country and things that are just amazing sights all throughout the country, and building an itinerary that will really bring you a lot of joy and should spark some wonderful memories after you get back. So a few tips on that. In particular, I'm going to look a little bit at Tokyo and Kyoto, since those are the two main cities that almost everybody seems to ask about and everybody really should go see. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go into a lot of detail about other interesting areas around the country, but hopefully if this program is well received, we'll have a chance to do some more programming down the road. And then finally, we'll have a chance to dig into some of the Q&A, the questions that you kindly sent in. As Dewan mentioned, we got an overwhelming response. So thank you so much for doing that. It really makes a difference to have some things that we can look into a little bit before getting on the call and having to explain exactly what's going on. And then hopefully at the end, we'll also have a chance to do a little bit of what I call traveler show and tell. So give those of you who are on the call a chance to share some of your stories, highlights, recommendations, and key things that you would like to recommend for people who are traveling to Japan or thinking about a trip to Japan that they can enjoy when they go there. So let me start my journey. I first went to Japan many, many years ago as a high school exchange student. You can see me, you may not be able to recognize me with all that hair, but on the left with my host grandmother. I lived in Hokkaido for a year, and that was the beginning of my really just lifelong interest in and love of travel in Japan. While I was in Hokkaido that year, I had a chance to travel a little bit. I took a trip by myself in the middle of winter from Hokkaido down to Kyushu, around to visit some friends who were staying at different places, back through Honshu and back to Hokkaido during my winter break. I also lived in Japan during college, and that was one of my peak travel periods. I actually hitchhiked around. I lived in Tokyo, attended the Inter-University Center for Language Studies in Japan, and while I was living in Tokyo, hitchhiked around Shikoku and back to Tokyo again. And then at New Year's, I actually hitchhiked all the way up to my host family in Hokkaido over New Year's vacation, and then hitchhiked back again. I had some quite wild and hairy adventures during that trip, which I won't go into today, but were really fun, kind of life-shaping experiences. And then, now that I have a family, I've really enjoyed introducing my wife and children to Japan. We lived in Japan from 2016 to 2018 and had a fantastic experience, a family experience, in part because we had a chance to travel around to so many different locations in Japan while we were living there. And so part of the basis for today's program is my experiences traveling around Japan with the family and then dating back clear to my high school years. I happen to have written a blog while we were living in Japan, which also has a lot of travel recommendations. I've included the name of that below, and we have a link to that that we can share with people who are interested in following up on some of that. So Japan travel, has really come storming back after the COVID years. It dropped almost to nothing in 2020, 2021, 2022, as I'm sure Kato-san can relate, having been in the airline business that entire time. In 2023, it came storming back, and this year, travel levels are actually exceeding the peak year in 2019. So 2024 looks to have the record number of visitors to Japan ever in history, and so that's something that is influencing, a lot of the availability of lodging, flights, and other things like that. One thing I will point out is that U.S. travelers, while they have been a big part of that and have seen a lot of growth, it's actually only the fifth most significant source of travelers to Japan. In fact, it's behind South Korea, China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong in terms of number of visitors to Japan. So although I'm sure most of the people on this call are here in the States, a lot of the travelers to Japan in terms of numbers are coming from Asian countries. So what is driving all this interest in Japan? Kato-san and I were talking a little bit about that. He says, you know what, I really think it's the cheap yen exchange rate. And certainly that is absolutely part of it, and a great reason to think about traveling to Japan right now. But I think that really the core motivation for going to Japan, at least for many people I've talked to, is that it is such an excellent place to visit. It has super high visual appeal. There's so many things, whether they're contemporary sites and locations, or whether they're historic sites and locations that have really high visual appeal, make for great photographs, are really fun to see and look different from a lot of things that we know. There are really an unlimited number of things and really fun and interesting things to do and experience in Japan across all kinds of interest areas, from food to culture, history, anime, popular culture, sports, entertainment, many things like that. And at the same time, Japan is a really good place to travel because it is both familiar in the sense that the Japanese population enjoys a high standard of living, and you can get everything you need. You can drink the water. You can eat the food. Every place you go is safe and clean and nice to go. But at the same time, it's also really different. And one of my wishes for people who travel to Japan is that they not limit themselves to enjoying just the famous sites and attractions, but also have a chance to kind of experience what life is like for Japanese people and the many things that kind of typify life in Japan. I think my family was surprised and delighted by how different things were when we were living there, for 2 years and a few years back. It also is clean, safe, and tasty. You can eat and drink anything just about that you find, as long as it appeals to you. There are things that may not appeal to you, so you might not want to eat or try those. But in general, if you find something available in a store or restaurant, you can count on it being clean and hygienic. And so it's a really good place to go. It's one of the best bargains in years. The yen dollar exchange rate is now more in our favor than it has been since the 1990s. So it really is, it makes a lot of the things appear much cheaper in Japan than they did even a few years ago. And there have been a lot of changes in the world since, certainly since I first went to Japan, many years ago. And in particular, I would point to technology making a major difference, both in terms of translation tools, Google Maps, and other things like that, that really make it a great time to visit Japan. Kato-san, anything you'd like to add to the list of what's up with Japan travel these days?
Yeah, actually, you got everything, and I would add on the weather difference, at least for summer, winter, autumn, spring. Actually, autumn, spring may be a bit similar, but the color of the leaf is quite different, brown and green. You can enjoy at least 4 tastes. So let me say you should better go at least 4 times to enjoy the country.
At least once a quarter to enjoy the different seasons.
Yep. Very different.
Great. Well, some of the things that I just love about Japan are the scenery in so many places. This is just a picture from the train in Nagano Prefecture, not far from Tokyo. Urban landscape, in some ways a city is a city, but in other ways, Tokyo is just an amazing, incredible city to both visit and travel around, move around in. It's a very different experience from being in New York or other places, which people who've been there, I think will well understand. It has incredible food of all kinds of, different kinds of flavors and preparation styles. This is in a restaurant in Tokyo that is an amazing kind of visual and auditory experience as well as a food experience. So there are lots of places to experience that. Of course, it has centuries, if not millennia, of history that you can visit and take part in, including buildings that date back hundreds of years, if not in some cases more than 1,000 years. And it really is this is from Izumo Taisha, one of the great historic places on the backside of Japan that is associated with the founding, the origin story of the Japanese nation. And it has many, many cultural traditions that are both vibrant and very much alive these days. These are some people carrying a Mikoshi shrine on a festival day in Asakusa area. Incredible to see, not just once a year, but throughout Tokyo and many cities in Japan, there will be shrines and festivals where people get together, carry their shrines around the neighborhood while they're chanting and singing, and it really is quite a spectacular event. That's something that my family, really loved. Japan is also just a great place for people watching. Here's some small children riding the train on their own on their way to school. Kids as young as 5 and 6, get on board a train, head to school without any kind of parental accompaniment. And it's kind of strange to think about when even in a safe suburban environment here in the Bay Area, we were walking our kids to school until they were in 5th or 6th grade.
But actually today they may be using the smartphone.
Yeah, that's right. But the schools often don't allow them to use the smartphone, so they have some restrictions on that too.
You're right.
So here are a couple just basic quick travel tips for those of you who are preparing, may even be packing your bags. A few things that I have kind of while we were living in Japan in 2 years, I think we had 15 or 16 groups of friends and family come and visit and stay with us while we were there. So we had a regular kind of rotating list of visitors and friends who were with us. You should try very hard to pack light and pack lighter than you think you possibly can. Really limit yourself to one bag because you will be using transit in most cases. You have to schlep a big bag around everywhere you go. And it really is both unpleasant and annoying to the Japanese people when especially foreign tourists get on board carrying 2 gigantic suitcases and a backpack and something else as well. You'll do lots of walking in Japan, so you should bring good walking shoes, and ones that slip on and off are especially good because there are many places where you will need to take your shoes off when you go in a building and you step up to go in a building, and then you need to put your shoes back on when you exit the building. So, high top laced boots are not a great idea for that. In the same fashion, socks with no holes, highly recommended because you will be displaying your stocking feet in many places. Rain is fairly common in Japan, especially in the summer months, so be sure you have gear for rain. Another tip that I suggest people do is to rent a pocket Wi-Fi at the airport. You should reserve those in advance. There are many companies that rent those. They're really pretty reasonable for a week or 2-week trip, and that way you will have no spots in your access to getting on the internet, using your map application, using your translation application and so on your phone, which will be really helpful. In fact, you may find that you need an extra battery pack to keep your phone from dying while you're moving around. Japan is very much a cash society, so you will also need to withdraw some cash, which fortunately you can do by using your ATM card in a cash machine in any kind of convenience store or at the airport, other places. But one thing is that the number pad in Japan often doesn't have the letters associated with the numbers. So if you have a security code that you remember as a word or a phrase, make sure you remember what the numeric equivalent of that is, because you may have to find that you have to punch that in some way without remembering exactly what was on your phone. Okay, so you've got your you got your appetite whetted, you're getting ready to go, and the first thing you want to do is you have to get to Japan, which in most cases means flying into Tokyo. There are 2 main airports in Tokyo, Narita and Haneda, and then another possibility, another fairly common embarkation point or disembarkation point is Osaka. And what I'll do is, there are many international carriers that cover Japan. We at Japan Society are fortunate to have support both from ANA and Japan Airlines, and I personally think that both of those are just both just an amazing flight experience, and in both the customer service level and the quality of the rather long trip. The time you spend on a rather long trip from the West Coast to Japan. So I highly recommend both of those places. Kato-san, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of when people should think about flying, or how what
Yes, yes.
fare or accessibility
Maybe
standpoint
you
is?
may or you may not know. Just a general information. There are these 4 carriers today are flying from San Francisco, San Jose area to Japan, and out of total 9, the 4 flights go to Narita. 3 flights go to Haneda, and 1 flight goes to Osaka. This is only provided by United. And most of the flights leave around noon from San Francisco, arriving in the afternoon, Japan. Except only 1 flight leaves midnight from San Francisco, arrives very early morning, 5 a.m. in Tokyo. That is provided by ANA. But yeah, you'll have a good choice traveling to flying to Tokyo, Osaka, and Narita. The peak seasons, I would say, starting from March by the cherry blossom season up to October, November, it is pretty good weather, good season. And always the new year is a crowded peak season. The low demand becomes be able to offer the cheap price tickets. It starts from December to February, but most of the cities in Japan is quite cold. Especially if you go to the north part, Hokkaido, you can see a bunch of snow. And especially the summer season, which I like, June up to early July is the rainy season, such like monsoon in Asia, very humid. And after that, with this humidity, July, August is, I will say, killing hot, which I like, but I hear some travelers coming from Singapore that they always say they want to go back to their country south down Singapore. It's much cooler. But anyway, yeah, it's about it. Thank you.
Great. So once you get to Japan, you will need to move around, and far and away the most common form of land transport is train. Not only does it get you around, it is just a fantastic experience. I'm a huge fan of Japanese rail transport. I wish we had a lot more of it, something like that here in the United States, but it is on a completely different level. I have to say, both its long distance train and its subway and internal city transit is really an amazing experience. So a couple of people had asked some questions about ticketing on trains. You may be familiar with Japan Rail Pass. Japan offers a pass that can be used for 1, 2, or 3 weeks to travel not all trains, but most trains that are owned by one of the JR entities. And those can be a good deal if you're doing a lot of traveling, although they raised the prices a few months ago. And so it's become much less of a good deal than it used to be. So if you are planning to travel to Japan, you may want to just kind of compare prices for what it would cost you to book travel individually to different locations, or if you have a rail pass. It does make it easier because you can just show your rail pass when you go through the ticket gate and get off the train. So there is a kind of a convenience factor to it, but it is not nearly the bargain that it used to be. And then on the right side of the screen, you can see the Suica and Passmo. These are IC cards, which basically you load cash onto the card, and then you can use it to buy not just train tickets, but all kinds of things in Japan, from things in vending machines to things, you can use it at the convenience store. You can use it lots of different places to buy things, kiosks within the station and so on. I find this tremendously helpful. There was a short period when it looked like it was kind of difficult to get new cards issued because of a shortage of IC chips. It seems to have abated a little bit, and then once you have a card, you just will top it off with add a few thousand yen to the card, and then you're ready to go and use it again. So riding the rails in Japan, it is like I said, it's a wonderful experience, and it can be anything from a
Wonderful.
pleasant to kind of an unpleasant, kind of an unpleasant ride, depending upon the time of day you go. During rush hour in the subways in Tokyo, get notoriously busy. Kato-san seemed to think that this was kind of nostalgic. He was a bit nostalgic seeing people packed into a subway car like this.
But this is true. This is true. Really true.
And it is kind of amazing to see how people just kind of squeeze themselves into what doesn't look like any space at all. And then, the door will shut and off the train will go. With regard to rail passes, if you decide that that is something you want to use, you need to buy them in advance. You can't buy them in Japan. You have to buy them in advance. You probably need at least a couple weeks before you go to order it and get it delivered to you. And then once you get to Japan, you get the actual pass issued. You take your voucher to a ticket office at the airport or in a few stations, and you get the actual pass issued. But you need to have that voucher purchased by the time you arrive in Japan. The long distance trains that are called the Shinkansen or bullet train are one of the main ways to move, especially within a few hours of your city, like from Tokyo to Kyoto is a couple hours away. And bullet train is really kind of the main way that people would travel there. It is a fantastic experience, smooth, fast, efficient. I read someplace that over the I think they opened around 1960, and over the entire lifetime of all bullet trains in Japan, the average delay is something like, within 60 or maybe 100 seconds of scheduled time. So they really are just an amazing experience. But what that means is they're very precise. So you need to be ready to get on and get off when a train comes in. And we had a conference in Japan last year where somebody realized that he had forgotten his wallet in his seat, and he almost didn't get off the train on the right time because he was going to go back and look for it. And in fact, he didn't. He did leave his wallet on the train. But as with many things in Japan, a few calls later, we discovered that it actually turned up at the end of the route, clear down in Kyushu. And so they were able to send it back, cash included, and he was reunited with his wallet a few days later. I understand that there is an app called Klook, which can be used for making some reservations for train tickets. I have not used that myself, but it gets a lot of good press on some social media sites. So that might be something you want to check into. If you don't have that, you need to go to stations to something called the Midori Guchi, which is the ticketing window at stations where you can make a reservation and get tickets for different future days of travel. Subways, literally millions of people riding the subway every day in Tokyo. Some stations receive in excess of several million passengers a day traveling through them. They can be a little bit intimidating, but they really are an amazing experience. So if you happen to go to Japan and you end up taking taxis the whole time, I think you've really missed out on a chance to experience something fun and interesting. You have to be a little bit careful. You have to punch in and punch out. So you have to remember to use your Passmo or your paper ticket. You have to present that when you get off the train, as well as when you go out of the station, as well as when you go into the station. And you should be a little bit careful about express and local. We took a family trip and I got separated from my wife and daughter, and we were headed to a train. I was wondering where they were, and I got a text message that they had boarded the express train for someplace else. And so we sent the rest of the crew ahead, and I waited for them to catch the next train back to where I was waiting, and we could be reunited and head on our way. So that does happen. You have to be a little bit careful about which train you're boarding, but still, it can be a great experience. There are other ways, which I also think are really great ways to travel around Japan. Buses, especially in urban environments, are essential, and they're actually really amazing. They can seem a little bit more complicated. I don't recommend taking a big suitcase on a bus because they can be more crowded. But even buses these days in Japan have announcements in English, and so you should be able to ride those if you, especially if you use Google Maps. You can get very detailed step-by-step instructions for your route. Taxis are, Uber is not as well. There are not as many Ubers in Japan, although there are some. But there are a huge fleet of taxis in large cities. They will open the door for passengers, so you don't even need to open the door. The drivers often wear white gloves, and they invariably are very clean and a wonderful experience. And you don't even need to tip. So that's another plus about taking taxis in Japan, and they can be, get you where you need to go pretty quickly. A couple of people also asked about rental cars. Somebody asked about rental motorcycles. I also think this is a really good opportunity, especially if you're traveling to a more rural area or you want to get out and about and really explore some countryside. So you can reserve and rent rental cars in Japan. However, you need to have an international driver's license, which in the United States means typically going to AAA to get a 1-year license that can be used to rent. If you don't have one, you won't be able to rent a car, and you will need to have a credit card to take to the rental agency to rent. Cars in Japan drive on the left side of the road, so you have to be aware that you will be left side drive. And roads can be very narrow and windy, but it is really fun to get out and explore things that otherwise you might not be able to reach. And these days almost every car has a navigation system, or you can use your phone to do that. The other thing, which I will just do in the spirit of a little bit of a public service announcement, is there are a lot of cultural norms and practices in Japan that sometimes are a little bit different from the way we travel. And I think they're kind of embodied in the Japanese word meiwaku, which means kind of an inconvenience. Don't be an inconvenience to those people around you. So if you ride on a subway, you'll immediately notice that people line up and they wait their turn to get on the subway. This is not New York City. It's not Beijing, where people kind of push in, while people are trying to get out. People wait and take their turn and get on the train and do it in a quite orderly fashion. If you go up and down the escalators, as you will many, many times, you'll notice in Tokyo that people stand on the left and walk on the right. So if you've got a big suitcase and you're standing on the right, you're going to cause trouble for people behind you. It's also forbidden to talk on cell phones on the train. And even people, occasionally you will see somebody take a call, but almost always people will put their phone on silent mode, and they will not take a call or make a call on the train, which actually, once you get used to it, is really nice. Also, with the exception of kind of moving from the airport to your local accommodations, generally try to avoid taking a lot of bags on the train, because it can be quite an inconvenience. It can also be hard to get on and off at the right time if you're trying to kind of get through a big mob of people right by the door. I like this picture on the right, which was actually a magnetic sticker that the car rental agency that we borrowed a car from when we were visiting Izu Peninsula in Japan put on the car. And as those of you who read Japanese can see, the English version at the top of the sticker says friendly driving, but the Japanese version says Gaikoku no kata ga unten shite imasu. So it basically is a warning to other drivers that there's a foreigner driving this car. So please excuse the erratic driving behavior. In Japan, you will also find a lot of different options for lodging and accommodations. They break down into some different categories. Hotels come in various flavors. Some people will go and use their points to stay in Hyatt or Marriott or other things like that. Those are great. But if you want to stay in something that's more Japanese, business hotels, you can see a picture on the lower left-hand side, are really quite reasonable, especially for a single traveler, because rooms in Japan are paid for by the number of people staying there. So if you have 2 people, it'll be twice the price, basically. 3 people, 3 times the price, and so on. But they can be, while the rooms are much smaller than we're familiar with, they can generally be okay. I find them okay. I usually stay in a business hotel, although not usually one quite as small as the one pictured here. And then if you're staying for a longer period, there's a category called a stay hotel, and those will often have a washing machine inside the room. They'll have ironing board and some other things like that you might need, maybe a hot plate that you can use to cook something. So those can be good for, especially if you've got families or you plan to stay one place for, a number of days. It can be a good place to go. Some other options which I really like, and I strongly recommend to my friends when they're asking about where to stay, are Japanese inns, known as ryokan. And then a slightly, a little bit, I would say, More along the lines of a B&B is something called a minshuku, where often the owner will be a little bit more, interact a little bit more with the guests, may have a kitchen area where they serve people, or a dining area where they serve people together. Those can often be just wonderful experiences with a chance to chat a little bit, get to a flavor of life, what life is like for the people who run the inn. And then Airbnb. Japan passed regulations a few years ago that kind of tightened restrictions on Airbnb, but especially for families, Airbnbs can be good because you get much more space for the price. And so when we were traveling as a family, we would often rent an Airbnb as a really good alternative and cheaper alternative than renting a hotel with a lot more space and really often very nice accommodations. The other thing that many people may already know about and have experienced, and if you haven't, you absolutely must do when you're in Japan, is go to a hot spring. They're also called onsen in Japan, and the onsen experience is just a fabulous way to spend, usually Japanese travelers wouldn't spend, 3 or 4 days at an onsen. They would go for maybe a night or two, and the experience would involve taking a bath, sometimes multiple baths in open air baths, or different temperature baths, those kinds of things. And then just a fabulous meal, both for dinner and breakfast, that are usually included as part of the experience. So Kato-san may be more of an aficionado of onsen than I am. Do you want to share any onsen tips for people?
Yeah, I know. How can I say it's one of the worst to experience, and yeah, it does, charge quite a bit, but quite a unusual experience for us too. So won't be going there quite often, several times at once, or maximum twice a year if you can go. That's excellent.
Yeah, the price will often be, the cost of the food will be almost as much as the lodging sometimes. And it can be just a spectacular dinner of, maybe 10, 12 courses of different kinds of food that come out, some that are prepared at your table and other things.
And today you can find it through the website. There are many types. So as Steve-san typed on the screen, thank you, Google. It's the easiest way to find out.
So just a couple things on booking accommodations. There were several questions that we received about how to book places. There really are a ton of online booking tools. I tend to use booking.com for most of the places when I travel. There are many other booking engines that you can use: travel.rakuten.com, jalan.net. Those are both Japanese, Japan-based sites that also are available in English. I included a link here to a site that includes a bunch of different thematic booking engines. So you can have like minshuku booking, or traditional ryokan booking, or you can have by type of stay and those kinds of things from this site. You can find those. Kato-san told me that he usually goes direct to the venue itself, and that can be good because sometimes it will be cheaper, but in any case, the service level is usually a little bit better when you book directly from a venue. Although you have to kind of know what you're looking for and which site you want to go to do that. So the benefit of going to an aggregator site is that you can see some of the features, the size of the rooms, the kinds of food they have, those kinds of things, and see. A couple other considerations when you're doing booking. As I mentioned, you pay per person. So make sure you have the size of room that you're looking for the number of people that can accommodate the number of people in your group. Meals may be included or not included. Sometimes you have the option to decide that. You definitely need to make reservations ahead of time. Now that travel has returned to such an active level, it is, like right now, if you went to book something, I'm sure you could find something, but still the selections become much more limited because places get full. And when you look for a room, you can also decide whether you want a Western style, which would be a bed, or you can get a Japanese style, which is also referred to as washiki. And that usually means that you're sleeping on futons on a tatami floor. You take your shoes off when you go inside the room. But those can be really nice too, especially for families where you can maybe spread out a little bit. And then during the day, they will fold up the futons and put those in the closet so you have extra space during the day. Just some, think about some things that make a location better. Sometimes people say, well, where should I stay? And so my answer is, well, it depends on what you're planning to do. So, try to find something that's near transit, that you don't have to walk too far to get to a station. You have some activities that you're really interested in participating in, find something near that. Those can be good things. So that's a little bit of the basics about travel in Japan. Now let's talk about where to go and what to do. And this is, I think, a really common question. Looking at a lot of the online advice sites and things, people will ask about, what should I do? I have a week to go to Japan, or I have 2 weeks to go to Japan. What should I, be sure to see? Should I go to Osaka, or should I go to Kyoto? Should I do this or that? So I have some general kind of rules of thumb. I would say one is, give yourself enough time to really look at an area. I would say if you're traveling from the U.S. to Japan, it would be good to plan at least a week. It's kind of hard to do given the long travel time to get there and back. I think a week is a good time, and that gives you plenty of time to do a number of things, but not enough time to do everything you want to do. A couple weeks is even better. That'll give you a chance to travel around a little bit and see a few other cities besides, maybe Tokyo and Kyoto and one other place. I also really think it's important to think about, what are you into? So one of the first questions I ask when people say, where should I go? What should I see? Is like, well, I don't know. It depends on what you like to do. Do you like food? Do you like history? Do you like scenery and outdoors? Do you like sports and entertainment? Do you like manga and digital things? So it really depends. Do you like traditional crafts and arts? So it depends a lot on what you're looking for. And there is so much, there is such a wealth of things to look at in Japan that you can go in any of those areas and find more than enough to keep you busy for the entirety of your trip. But I would say a couple suggestions that I have for most people is, as much as I like Tokyo, and I think it's a fascinating place to stay, I really encourage you to try to get out into the countryside a little bit. It's just a very different experience. It's so peaceful, and it really gives you a sense of some of the fiber of Japanese culture, really is embodied in some of the more rural and remote places. I also really encourage people to, not just think about Japan as sort of a museum of history, but also it's a vibrant, society and living condition. So, to the extent that you can really, get a feel for how, Japanese people are living, that is really important too. I also think it's great to look at, kind of contemporary activities while you're traveling. Two really good resources for that are some online sites. One's called Time Out Tokyo. Another one's Tokyo Cheapo. It'll mention activities that are coming up this week and next week and so on. So you can have a good feel for what's taking place while you're traveling. And the last thing I would say is, as much as, maybe a lot of us really like to look at social media and post on social media, I would say try not to let TikTok determine all of your planning. There are many sites that are just kind of saturated with Instagram photographers and people who are posting pictures of places that they want to put online. But there's so much more, and there's so much more really outstanding places to see and things to do in Japan besides what gets the vast majority of kind of the traffic. So I'll talk a little bit more about that with regard to Tokyo and Kyoto specifically. Any other tips, Kato-san, from you as far as putting together a good itinerary?
Yeah, pretty fine right now. Thank you.
Okay. So as you think about Japan, you may or may not have already decided where you want to go, what you want to do. But basically, I kind of think of it like this. There are kind of three big areas that I often hear about people when they talk to me about, oh, we're going to Japan, we want to see this or that. One is Tokyo, the Tokyo-Yokohama greater metropolitan area. I mean, it's in excess of 30 million people. Yokohama is right next to Tokyo. It's very accessible with within a 45-minute train ride or so from downtown Tokyo. Kyoto and Nara are two, really historic, beautiful historic cities that also are very close to each other. And then Mount Fuji, which is kind of a part of Japanese life. It's not quite as much of a destination as Tokyo and Kyoto are, but many people, you will see Mount Fuji from many different places in the country. Other major locations that people like to go to, Osaka, Kobe is an area that I personally haven't been quite as much, but is a popular area. Hakone is about an hour or a little bit more away from Tokyo with a lot of hot springs and really beautiful scenery. Kamakura is also just a short day trip from Tokyo. You can get on a train and be there in an hour or so from Tokyo, and it has a really beautiful seaside town with a very large Buddha statue. Nikko is another one. And then Hiroshima and Miyajima are a really popular destination, and I think very important in a lot of ways. Really a good place to go and kind of get a sense of the impact of the atomic bomb, as well as a beautiful area in Miyajima, which is quite close to Hiroshima. And then there are the other four main islands. Tokyo and Hiroshima are on an island called Honshu, but Hokkaido is up in the north, Kyushu is down in the southwest, and Shikoku is a large island that's kind of between Shikoku and Honshu is the inland sea, and each of those areas have their own kind of distinct personalities. There are many other locations, just really countless locations. I listed up some here that are favorites of mine, from travels that I did myself and with my family. These are all, very accessible. You don't need any special skills or permissions or whatever to go to them. They're all within, relatively easy travel distance, and they all have, their own merits to them. So let's talk a little bit about Tokyo. Tokyo really is, I call it the mother of all cities. It is incredibly densely populated, more than 6,000 people per square kilometer. But at the same time, one of the things that always amazes me in Tokyo is how quiet and serene it is once you get off of the main streets. Even the main streets have just a very Japanese orderliness to them. And people will observe traffic rules. I just came back from a trip to Mexico, which is kind of the opposite of Tokyo. But people observe traffic rules, and once you get off of the main streets, it really is very quiet. In fact, we lived, our house was in a district of Tokyo called Meguro, and it was so quiet near our house. We could have the windows open. The only thing we would hear is the buses going by every 15 minutes or so, and then the one other thing that we could hear was there was one person who was constantly talking out loud and shouting and quite noisy. It happened to be a foreigner who lived across the street and left his windows open. But other than that, we didn't hear hardly anything. And so it really is kind of amazing. You can walk around downtown Tokyo and think, this is like incredibly quiet for such a large, vibrant city. Tokyo also has thousands hundreds at least of temples and shrines. It seems sometimes like every corner has a little shrine or temple. Many times they'll have a sign explaining where they came from. We had one in our neighborhood where we lived that was first built in the year 800. And so it had continued in continuous operation for more than 1,200 years, and had a monthly street fair that they put on the 28th of every month. So there are lots of things like that to explore. The subway system is amazing, as I mentioned. The average quality of food in Tokyo is just, and across Japan is incredible. There are parks and gardens that are spectacular. And you can really, it really is a shopper's paradise. Anything that you want to buy, anything that you want to explore and get, you can find in Tokyo someplace. So I mentioned kind of things that are on the beaten track and off the beaten track. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go to things on the beaten track, because those can be, they didn't become famous because they were boring. They became famous because people thought they were really cool. However, I would encourage you to get away from some of the main kind of well-known, well-trafficked, and in most cases very, very crowded sites, to explore some things that are a little bit more unique and different, and will really give you a flavor that you can't find at some of the larger, more crowded places. I put a few of my favorite things down here. This is just a, kind of a grab bag of things that I really enjoyed, or types of things that you can find in Tokyo. One of the main things, as I mentioned, is Japanese festivals. They're wonderful. There's the kind where people carry the mikoshi around. Sometimes you'll be walking down the street and you'll hear chanting coming down, and suddenly you'll see a mob of people and they're carrying one of these, very, very heavy mikoshi walking down the street, especially in the summertime. These are quite common, and you can probably find out about them in one of those resources I mentioned, Tokyo Chipo or Time Out Tokyo. Street food, street fair food. There you'll see takoyaki, the octopus balls. You'll see yakisoba. You'll see all kinds of foods and things like that. And the good thing is that you really can rely on the hygiene and cleanliness of preparation, so that that food is really quite good to eat in Japan. Jindaiji is an area with a garden and beautiful temple complex. Sumo tournament is just a fascinating thing to see. There's a big underground mall of shops with characters and things near Tokyo Station. One of my favorites is finding historic buildings that have been reconstructed or brought together. And there is an open air there are several open air museums in Tokyo. Many gardens. This is just one that you might not find on the most common list, is Koishikawa Korakuen Garden. Whiskey and sake bars, karaoke, many things to explore in Tokyo. Here's just some other things from my experience too. Fireworks shows in Japan are just incredible. Some of the best fireworks I've ever seen. And they take place throughout the summer. They don't happen only on July 4th. So if you have a chance, you might consider doing that, although they can be very crowded. I also really like, when I ride on the train, if you go up to the front car, you can actually look right over the conductor's shoulder in many cases and see what it's like to kind of ride down the rails. They have their own system for indicating stops and starts and what they check as they pull into and out of the station. The Tori no Ichi Festival is just a festival that takes place a couple times at the end of the year, November, December. And my favorite museum in Tokyo is the Edo Tokyo Museum. It's a historical museum about the history of Tokyo, but it is currently being renovated. I can't remember when they said it's going to come back online, but that's a wonderful place to see. And then there's a ton of art too. This is from a Yayoi Kusama exhibit at the National Art Gallery, although she now has her own museum in Kaburazaka area. Okay, Kyoto. That's the other place that almost everybody wants to go and should want to go. It just is really the heart of Japanese history. It was the capital of Japan for 1,000 years. There really are just an unbelievable wealth of amazing temples, shrines, historical buildings, sprinkled throughout the city. You may know that during World War II, the Allies, many historians and people encouraged the Allies not to bomb Kyoto. So it actually wasn't bombed in World War II because of all the historical significance that it held. And so as a result, it's still, things survive from, 1,000 years ago in many cases. It has outstanding gardens. It's the home of traditional culture and crafts of many types. Amazing dining, including dishes that are unique to Kyoto. And it has galleries for all kinds of crafts, ceramics, textiles, lacquerware, other things like that that are made in the Kyoto area. Again, in Kyoto, some of the main things that people will talk about are Fushimi Inari Shrine. You may have seen the red torii gates. That's from a place called Fushimi Inari, which also is quite spectacular, but is very crowded, especially in the lower area of the park. Kinkakuji, the Golden Pavilion, is great. Kiyomizu Temple is a very important temple with a beautiful view of the city. But it also is something that can get really crowded during the day. So if you are going to go to one of these major sites, my suggestion is to go really early in the morning, right when it opens, or in some cases even before. Kiyomizu is actually accessible. When I'm there, I like to go jogging in the morning, and so at 6:30 or 7, I'll take a run by, and there's almost nobody there, so it can be a beautiful time to visit. But one of the things that also is very surprising to me is that right next to these super famous and just incredibly packed major sites, there are almost equally as beautiful temples or other locations, gardens and things that are just amazing in and of themselves. And yet they'll have a handful of people, 2, 5, maybe 10 people visiting. And it literally is a stone's throw from some of these famous sites. And so if you just walk a little bit further, you can see some really amazing things without nearly the level of crowds. I listed a few here. 2 of my favorites are the imperial villas, Katsura Bikyu and Shugakuin Bikyu, but you have to get special permission. So you have to work a little bit harder to get a ticket to go see them. Tofu ryori or tofu dinner is a typical Kyoto dish that is available. Nishiki Market has gotten a little bit touristy, but is still a living market where they sell dried fish and pickles and veggies and crafts and different things like that. It's a long shotengai that is under a cover for quite a ways, maybe half a mile or as much as a mile. I list a few favorite temples here. Daitokuji is a big temple complex. Ohara is a little bit outside of Kyoto, but very easy to get to by bus. And then galleries for textiles, ceramics. There's a kaleidoscope museum, which is a very small little museum, but a wonderful collection of kaleidoscopes. You can also do bicycle tours or participate in a Maiko dance performance, attend a Maiko dance performance. So there are so many things to do and experience in Kyoto that you really can spend several days there and really enjoy life. Here are a few of the things that I mentioned. The Japanese sweets class. This is a class that's taught at a sweet maker. It's like an hour or 2 hours long, and you actually learn how to make Japanese sweets. These are ones that we made, and then you get to eat your output together with matcha green tea. The Nishiki Market I mentioned is pictured in the middle. And then the Philosopher's Path is a very beautiful winding walk along a small stream in kind of northeastern Kyoto that is just a lovely place to go and walk along. So let me just wrap up with outside of Tokyo and Kyoto, I really hope you will get out to some other destinations. I've included 3 of my favorites here. One is Shirakawa-go, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site with farmhouses dating back, in some cases, several hundred years. That is just a beautiful place in the winter as well as in the summer. Really recommend that if you have a chance to go see it. The Nakasendo is basically a series of towns along what used to be a route that people traveled to get from Kyoto to Tokyo back in the feudal period. This happens to be a town called Magome, which has retained a lot of the character and feel of ancient Japan. So inns, shops, restaurants, all kind of clustered along this central walkway in Magome really have a very distinct feel of taking you back to old Japan. And then the last one is where I got my first exposure to Japan, Hokkaido. And although it's not quite, it's a little bit, Japanese people like it because it's so much more open and spacious than some places in Japan, which in some ways is more similar to places in the US. But it also is just a spectacular area of the country that is relatively unpopulated and still has beautiful nature, scenery, outdoor parks, and places. Like one of the places that my family and I stayed was an Airbnb that really was literally out in the middle of a field, off of cell phone zone, and we woke up to hear deer squeaking, outside the house, and just an amazing place. So Kato-san, I know you have some favorite places in Japan too. Anything that you want to on your short list?
You have covered everything, but the Kyoto place on your beat, I cannot miss the Kinkakuji. The Golden Pavilion is one of the place I like. Yeah, actually, I visited myself. I only visited once, and it was August. Again, it was killing hot, but something amazing. Yeah, I think I should better go to the winter season, seeing with the snow.
Great. So let me just mention a few other kind of final thoughts on having some great memories from a trip to Japan. Japan is a really family-friendly place too. So if you're thinking of going and you have kids, whether they be kind of preschool or preteen or high school age, there's so many things to do that they can really enjoy the trip. It's a great place to travel as a family. I encourage you take some chances, try something a little bit different, go into a restaurant that you aren't quite sure you'll be able to speak to somebody, or go to a location where you are not part of a tour group, but kind of have to figure your way around. One of my favorite things to do, especially in Tokyo, is just to wander around different neighborhoods. So just take a walk. There's so many little tiny streets, sometimes following streams and rivers that are covered over. It just is, it is really fun, and there is fascinating architecture and residences that you can see around you wherever you happen to be. I really encourage you to get up very early, like 5 in the morning, and you're actually helped by the time lag going to Japan, because most people will find themselves waking naturally at that time. It's supremely quiet and calm, even in Tokyo. And going out at that time, you can really get a sense of what the city is like without people kind of pushing and shoving. And then it just is it's a great place to see how people live there. It's a very different life experience for people in Japan than it is in many places here in the States. And you can get exposure to that just from your travels around. So, I think there's so many things to do and see in Japan. And so let me kind of pull our comments to a close there, and we will turn to the Q&A portion of today's program. So I think what we thought we would do, since we had so many people who did contact us by email in advance before the program, we thought we would go through and start answering some of the questions that came in, since there seemed to be some recurring themes that came up with that. And I see I haven't been able to follow the chat while I've been talking, but it looks like some of you have already been kind of exchanging some tips and ideas as well. So let's start off with a question. So there definitely were some questions on transit. So one question that came in was, where should I fly into, Osaka or Tokyo? Kato-san, do you have any thoughts about people who are traveling to Japan, where they should go?
Yeah, actually, as the flight from US goes only to Tokyo or Osaka, and it depends where you would like to visit, especially on the west side, Kyoto, Nara, Kobe, then yeah, why not Osaka? You can skip the transit from Tokyo. You would like to go to Hokkaido, eastern part, Tokyo, and no choice, it's Tokyo. So it depends where you would like to visit around. You can get in from Tokyo, come out from Osaka after visiting Kyoto. Yeah.
That's good. So I see that there have been several questions come up about, what about speaking Japanese? If we don't speak Japanese, can we really realistically get around and get to some interesting places? And so I will answer that actually, it may have been different once upon a time, but I would say today, as difficult it is for many people to kind of read the menus and things like that, Japan is actually very accessible even for people who speak no Japanese. Now there are announcements on transit in almost every case in Japanese and English, and sometimes in Chinese and Korean as well. So it really is quite accessible. Signage in the subways is exceptional. It's so much better than signage in the United States that it can be complicated because it's a very big and massive system, but signage is available in English. And really with translation apps, it has gotten to the point where you really can communicate quite well with people by using Google Translate or something like that while you're moving around. And for those people who do speak Japanese, whether you speak just a little bit or you speak a lot, I would say one of the things that's very rewarding about traveling to Japan as a Japanese speaker is that people will be incredibly welcoming for anybody who tries to use Japanese. Even if your Japanese isn't very good, people will really appreciate the effort that you make to speak Japanese. And so it can be both encouraging and not nearly as embarrassing as you might think as it could be if your Japanese is not very good. So let me go to another question. So there were a couple kind of questions. This was from somebody named Sophia Liu. I don't know if you were on the program today? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just read it rather than wait. But there were some questions about how to do a different kind of visit to Japan. So people interested in doing, say volunteering or, rural living, volunteering on a farm, those kinds of things. They actually are, I didn't know off the top of my head what kind of resources were available, but I did a little searching, and it turns out that there actually are a lot of places there are several places that really specialize in this kind of thing. As many of you may know, rural Japan has been suffering from population decline. And so, there's a real effort to get people to partake in rural experiences. And so there seem to be some travel companies that specialize in that particular area. I've just put a link to a few places in the chat. And it is, I'm not endorsing any of them. I haven't worked with any of them, but it did look like they were offering, some things to people who are interested in that. One place I do know is that, when we visited that place called Shirakawa-go, one of my favorite places, there are traditional farmhouses that do offer rooms for rent. That's one of the ways that you can stay in that area. And so there are some websites that help you find bookings at those kinds of places. And so that may not be a working type of farm experience, but it is a place where you can go and live in a real house, a farmhouse. Stay in a farmhouse as opposed to a Western style hotel. Okay, this is one I was asking Kato-san earlier. Somebody, I think Lee Shepard, had asked a question, and the question was, how can you identify and be welcomed at small restaurants that don't cater to foreigners? So Kato-san, do you have any suggestions on how a non-Japanese can find those really kind of special little restaurants and not be kept outside when you show up looking to enjoy some food there?
Actually, straightforwardly speaking, I don't have the clear answer. And it is also pretty hard for me to find out. I usually go to use the site called the Tabelog, Tabelog, similar kind with Yelp, or find a local friend who has a recommendation. So yeah, it's pretty hard to find the small restaurants, but and even though it's a small one, the Taberogu does cover quite a bit number. So even if you don't have any friends in the town, yeah, why not try those sites?
Yeah, I think another thing is, sometimes you can have somebody intervene on your behalf. So if you're staying at a hotel or ryokan, they can make a recommendation.
Yeah,
sometimes.
that's also a nice way to access.
Yeah, and know where you would. One of the things that is somewhat distressing is, for example, we went and we're looking for. I had my heart set on having a yakiniku restaurant, and it seemed like every single yakiniku restaurant we went to said, closed, full. And even though you can sometimes see like empty tables sitting there, so I wasn't sure whether they were, they really didn't want some Westerners sitting down and kind of upsetting the other clients, or whether they really had. But my Japanese friends told me, no, in fact. Maybe they don't have enough service people, or sometimes they have a reservation coming up and they want to be sure to have the table available for somebody who is coming in later. So
yeah, and one other way is not just rely on the sites. Even though you stay not only the big ones but the small hotels, those concierge does have quite a bit of information, especially in local. So they are pretty nice to provide you good information, sometimes not on the sites too.
Very good. So another question that came up from a few people was, about traveling with family members, whether those be children. So somebody named Sarah had asked about, what should I do if I have an infant going with me to Japan? Is that possible? And I would say, and there were other people who asked about traveling with an elderly relative or with a handicapped person, something like that. So Japan is actually, I would say, has become an amazing place to travel with people of any age. at all. And part of that is because it is very easy to get around Japan on transit. So you can ride the train with a baby in a stroller. You can go places. It's very safe and clean. So in fact, one of our famous family stories is that our daughter, when we moved to Japan, walked out of her school and proceeded to get lost on one of the first days that we were there. It was before she had a phone. It was before she had identification with her, and she couldn't find her way back. So a couple hours later, we were sitting at home and got a call from the school. It's like, well, your daughter is missing. She went out at lunchtime and never came back. And so they organized an immediate search and sent the other students out in the neighborhood looking for her. And my wife and I were riding around on our bicycles trying to find her. And I said, well, I'm really not too worried, because in Japan, anything that gets lost gets returned. So I think we'll eventually find her. And sure enough, after a couple hours, one of the students found her wandering around the neighborhood and brought her back, and everything was all good. So it is a very safe place, even in the kind of what might seem to be kind of a scary circumstance. It is a good place. But I think there's some other things since it doesn't relate to everybody, I'll just put a link here in the chat. There are some good resources about traveling with children. And one I thought was the Lonely Planet Guide had a really good section about all the things you need to think about with a baby. So for example, there are not as many public trash cans in Japan. So if you're traveling with a baby, you want to be sure to have a bag that you can take dirty diapers in with you until you get to a place where you can dispose of them. So things like that you may need to think about. It's good also to have some wipes and things like that you need to have with you for those kinds of things. But and on the other side, elderly people, it is true that there are a lot of stairways in Japan, but most stations and most locations have an exit or entrance point where you can take an elevator to a different thing. And what's really interesting about Google Maps is you can often see where those entrance and exit points are in the station. And they can also, even the app will show you which cars to ride on for handicapped people. And so you can go and stand next to the car that you should be on with a person who has less mobility. You can know in advance where to go. And in fact, when we were living in Japan, my mother-in-law, who was in her late 80s and was using a wheelchair, came, and we were able to move around all over the place. In fact, one of our surprises was that the Meguro district actually rented us a wheelchair for 2 weeks for I think it was $5 a week or something like that. So it really was it was a very it was kind of a wonderful surprise and a good example of how well people who have some special needs can get around within Japan. Okay, so there have also been some questions about arts and crafts and taking advantage of, how do you kind of pursue those things in Japan? Japanese crafts are really amazing. And one of the programs that we have coming up is with an organization called Japan Craft 21 that is run by a gentleman named Steve Baymel. He was a longtime tour guide and travel provider in Japan. And some years ago, he turned his attention to really trying to educate people about really hundreds of traditional crafts and activities that are done by craftspeople in Japan that in many cases are dying out because the only practitioners of a certain kind of pottery making or ceramic ware or lacquer ware or paper making or weaving or those kinds of things are actually getting to the age where they are dying and they don't have successors to kind of take over their work. So we actually are very excited to have a program later in June that will feature Steve talking about ceramics and pottery of different traditions. But he has a website where he also gives a lot of information about some of these traditional crafts, and you can go and find out what kinds of things are being done to preserve them. So I really encourage that. I'm going to put I put his website in and we put his website and information about him in the chat. These are some of the sites. The last one is a different one, but you can see some things there. There also are some places in Japan that actually specialize in crafts. One that we visited was not really very far from Tokyo. It was a very small place called, it was in Gifu Prefecture called Takumi no Sato. It was near Minakami Onsen in Gifu. And there was a whole village with a bunch of different crafts. We actually just kind of on a whim stopped in there, and they had paper making and traditional crafts using silk cocoons and a whole bunch of other things that they were doing, their demonstration hands-on kinds of projects. It was perfect place to go and spend a day or an afternoon with the family and kids and really have a chance to kind of experience what that was like. So there are many things, but again, I would suggest either doing some searching to find out what kinds of things appeal to you, and there are a lot of resources available on those kinds of things. Let's see, kind of scrolling through some of the other questions. So people had questions about, kind of back on the transit side. So for travel within Japan, how often do trains leave? How frequently do they depart? Kato-san, do you want to talk a little bit about how easy it is to catch a train in Japan and where?
Yes, as the one who have experience, the train is somehow on incredibly punctual, and yeah, it is very regular. Of course, it doesn't run around 24 hours. The earliest from 5 a.m. up to 24 or 25 midnight. And the Shinkansen does leave in the peak time. It leaves in 2 minutes time. So 30 trains in an hour. It is quite a bit complicated which train you should get on where you would like to go. And I would like to recommend you the site called Japan Route Finder. If you just Google Japan Route Finder by Navitime. Navitime is a navigation time, Navitime. And this is quite useful and very easy to know what time you leave, which train you take, which station you transfer, which line you go, and it does explain quite clearly for this complicated transportation. But again, yeah, it is quite useful. Of course, there's a lot of cars running around town, but I would say the majority of the people travels using by the train, and you can drink rather than driving. Thank you.
We've been going on quite a while, so let me kind of put I really appreciated this question that somebody sent in today, and it was for each of the speakers, what are some of the aspects of visiting Japan that are underreported and underappreciated in the travel blogs? So let me start with Kato-san and see if you have any kind of final words about something that people who are kind of just cruising over the internet, looking at travel sites and advice sites and things like that, they might miss, or that are underappreciated by travelers to Japan. Any recommendations that you have?
Yeah, actually, it's not only, but the food in that country is quite variable. Of course, not only the Japanese food, you can enjoy all other countries' food, but not only ramen, sushi, steak is also there, but we enjoy yakiniku, and I hope you would enjoy the Japanese food with many varieties. And one more thing, what I would like to add is on the top, Steve-san and I were talking why many visitors are coming to Japan, and I said because of the Japanese weak yen. But on the other part, I would say after we had the Olympic Games in 2020. Actually, it was 1 year postponed due to COVID. Many investment and preparations, including the barrier-free, easy wheelchair access, translation. Many was prepared targeting that Olympic Games. And after that, I assume and I hope many visitor coming to Japan feels much easier to traveling this country. So even though you had a different and a difficult experience in the past, like 5, 10 years or 20 years ago when you visited Japan, we welcome much easier using also the technology by Google and others. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Kato-san. And I'll do a quick just a quick reiteration of something I mentioned earlier, which is some of my most memorable experiences from my times in Japan are my interactions with people there. And so as much as I love the physical scenery, the history, all the things that I see, I really have kind of an endless appetite for some of those things, as my kids might complain to you. I think that some of the things that really stick with me the most are the interactions I had with Japanese people, and many of them were just pure kind of by chance. I struck up a conversation with somebody at a restaurant, or I remember one time my wife and I were walking down the street, and somehow we were kind of deciding whether to go in someplace, and somebody came out and invited us in, and it was somebody we had never even met, and we spent a wonderful evening, drinking and chatting, and in some cases broken English, broken Japanese, getting to know people. Another case, we went to a yakitori restaurant, and before long, the cook at the yakitori restaurant had me behind the counter preparing skewers and sticking them on the grill. I'm not sure if that was legal, and if the health department had been by, they might not have liked that. But and another time when I was hitchhiking, somebody invited me to stay the night with him and his family, and so I ended up spending the evening in his house with his wife, and they've cooked a wonderful dinner, and he showed me this house that he had built by himself, and that just came from somebody who just randomly picked me up as I was waiting along the street, looking for a ride down the road. So I really think that my suggestion is, if you can find a way to strike up a conversation and try, in general, you are not Japan is such a safe environment that if people respond to you, they almost never are they trying to scam you or cheat you out of something or whatever, but they really are truly interested in kind of engaging. And so I think that's something I would hope everybody would have a chance to do when traveling to Japan. So let me kind of wrap up this part of the program. I've in particular been talking a lot, so people are probably tired of hearing me, but one of the things I had hoped to do is, for those of you who wish to stay online a little bit longer and, share some of your own experiences and thoughts, would love to, kind of open the mic and encourage people to, share some of those things. For those of you who've had enough and kind of have figured out what you want to hear and got what you wanted or didn't get what you want, you're welcome to, close out. But I'm really encouraged by the fact that it seems to be there a really active dialogue going on the chat. So part of my goal was really to encourage people to share their own stories, connections, advice, tips, travel suggestions, and so on. So I'm glad to see that seems to be taking place on the chat. So maybe we can, I don't know if we want to, kind of, if somebody has some thoughts that they want to share, maybe we could start with a question of, who has a favorite, secret place, special place that they've been in Japan that they would like to share.
Steve, do you want this part recorded, or should I stop the recording?
You can, I guess we can leave it on a little bit. I think, people would be very interested to hear what some of the attendees have to say. So I see a hand up. Maureen McNulty, my good friend from Stanford. Nice to see you, Maureen. And it looks like you have a comment or a question.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, thank you. Good to see you too. And I'm sort of like, it's trying to stick with everything. I just had hip replacement surgery, and I did it so I can travel. And So, and keep going a lot. But one of the questions I asked was, I'm trying to balance two adults who are in their 30s and me. And they've been to Japan before. My son goes frequently. He speaks the language. But we were looking at Tokyo, Kyoto, and maybe one other place. How much time should somebody like me spend in Tokyo so I get a real feel for it?
Okay, minimum one is not enough. 2 or 3 days minimum would be not bad. Of course, longer may be good, but yeah, minimum 2, 3 days at least would be fine.
My
Longer,
daughter was lobbying for 5.
yeah, that's pretty. That's really fine.
There,
Pretty
there
fine.
is an endless variety of things to do and see in Tokyo, and
Yeah, 5 days.
yeah,
That's beautiful.
Okay.
yeah, and I would say, people typically will arrive in the evening, so your first day is not really a day, and you kind of stay overnight. So you would need at least I would say 2 or 3 days at a minimum to kind of start to visit some of the places that are highest on your list. But I would easily say 4, 5, 6 days, depending on
That's
what you would like to do, is wonderful.
Yeah, excuse me. Japanese are rushy, so I just counted on the minimal. But yeah, 5 days is beautiful.
It depends a little bit on the length of your entire trip. So if you're staying for a week, you probably wouldn't want to spend more than half of it in Tokyo. But if you were staying for a couple weeks, spending 4 or 5 days, I think would be time that you could easily fill with activities.
And for the easy travel, the killing hot season, which I like, is not easy to travel. So spring and autumn is always beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Looks like we have a question from Jason. Do you want to unmute and ask your question or make your comment, suggestion?
Yeah, I just wanted to put in a good word for Fukui and Kanazawa, the whole Sea of Japan coast. Fukui has a very nice train station, lots of good shopping and dinosaur-themed snacks. And there's a lot of good seafood on that side of the main island for very reasonable prices, reasonable hotels. It's a very nice experience.
And different from Tokyo. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, one of the places your comment reminded me that one of the places we really enjoyed visiting was Kanazawa. And then we did rent a car from there and traveled around the Noto Peninsula, which, as many people may know, was the site of a really big earthquake right at the beginning of this year, but just a beautiful, very remote area with fishing villages and beautiful coastline and scenery. So thanks for the recommendation, Jason.
Yeah.
Stephanie, it looks like you've got a hand up.
There we go. Yes, thank you. My husband and I are going in July. We didn't have a lot of choice of the timing because we're going with the Grassroots Japan American Summit. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Oh, yes. And thank you, because you don't know this, but Japan Society of Northern California has agreed to host the Grassroots Summit next year in 2025. We are still working on the date, and we are looking for volunteers to help us plan the event. So,
well, my good friend did the one in 2010, Megumi, and
yes,
she's the one that got me to go on this trip.
I see. Excellent.
Anyway, here's my question.
Okay, we got to get your name down.
Yeah, go ahead.
I live in Sonoma. I am not
Perfect.
great in heat, and I would never have picked mid-July to go, but she insisted we had to do this. So we're doing it. I mean, are places air conditioned? Do I need to take water to douse myself with? I mean, I'm just kind of, in Sonoma, we're pretty spoiled, no humidity.
Okay.
And
I may be threatened too much. How can I say? Yeah, I know. And you don't have to bring. You can get everything in town. You don't have to bring from US. You can get everything in Japan, Tokyo, whatsoever. How can I say?
is it air conditioned?
And bunch of people are living over there. So let me just add, please enjoy the different weather from the beautiful California.
Is it air conditioned in a lot of places or not?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yes.
some years ago, and if you watch old black and white Japanese movies, you will feel the heat in the black and white movie because people are like got their fans, you know, and you can hear the cicadas humming, and it just feels
This is
oppressive
Gen
and
Z.
heavy. But yes, thank you, Kato-san, perfect. But these days, you know, any store would be air conditioned, any hotel would be air conditioned, taxis and trains would be air conditioned. So you know, you will be able to move around, you know, and get out of the heat. But it can be, you know, while you're moving, you'll feel it.
Yeah, at least I would just add, why don't you bring a small towel to be able to easily wipe your sweat? And
Okay.
that would help.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
great. Thanks so much.
You
Yeah.
too.
Thank you, Stephanie. Any other questions, comments, tips that people want to share? I see Larry has put something in the chat. Do you want to mention your suggestion, Larry?
Yeah, sure. It's an amazing. This guy was a photography critic and collector for 50 years, and made his collection available as this cafe. So if you have any interest at all in Japanese photography, he has all kinds of just in-depth, amazing collection. So every time I go to Tokyo, I spend 2 or 3 hours there. It's fantastic.
Great, good suggestion, and thank you for sharing that. I think we have to figure out some way to kind of share some of the dialogue that was going on the chat with folks. We'll check into that and figure out if there's a way we can do it. I see another question in here. You know, and we got some questions online as well about you know, using Japanese. So I would say one thing I would you know, was it Stephanie just mentioned this grassroots summit. That is an international exchange program that's been going on for 30 years, where just citizens of Japan 1 year will travel to a city in the US and do a homestay, and then activities for a week-long stay in the US in a designated city, which the centerpiece of which is a homestay with an American host. And then the next year, American group will go to Japan for a week-long period. This year's Grassroots Summit is taking place in Wakayama. And so that will take place in July. So people who are really looking for kind of a homestay experience and are interested in that can take part in the Grassroots Summit. So I don't know if Dewan or somebody can kind of post a link to the brochure and guide for you know, the Grassroots Summit this year, but that's something that we will be working on for next year as well. That's a good way to you know, really engage deeply with a you know, a Japanese host, you know, family or a Japanese host. I see, you know, and people also asked, you know, online about some hotel and accommodation recommendations. You know, it's a little bit hard to give a specific recommendation because, you know, people's interests and requirements vary quite a bit. But what I would say is one recommendation I feel really strongly about is when people go to Japan, they should try, if possible, to take part in a onsen experience. So at least spend one night at an onsen someplace. You know, there's a wide range from, you know, pretty low end places with you know, not nearly as nice facilities and the food, you know, is not quite as good, to really high end places that can also be very expensive. You know, it might be $1,000 a night or something like that, or in some cases even more. But you can see on some of the booking sites, you know, the relative quality and the kinds of accommodations. You can get a link to the website of the facility and really get a feel for what it's like. So I would definitely encourage people to do that. I would also encourage people to spend at least you know, a couple nights in a Japanese style ryokan. As you know, Dewan on our team was mentioning earlier, he always stays in ryokan. You know, it is a really nice, different way to experience accommodations in Japan. And you know, also for people with larger groups, can sometimes be a bit more flexible than a standard business hotel room, which is really, you know, pretty tiny. It's hard to find a room that you can have more than 2 people in. So that's another kind of place. But then the other thing you need to consider is where you want it to be. And so like in Tokyo, it's such a big geographic area that if you are interested in nightlife, you might want to be one place. If you're going there for business meetings, you might want to be in another area. If you have a certain kind of activity you want to take part in, there are other places that are closer. Like Shibuya is a very lively, active area. It may be too much for some people because it is so chaotic there. There are other places that are quieter, but maybe don't have quite the number of shops and restaurants and things like that. So it really is a bit of an individual decision, but I like the booking.com and other sites because you can see kind of regions where they are. You can see how far they are from transit hub and those kinds of things. Any other questions, comments that people want to share before we wrap up?
And let me just add one comment to enjoy and maximize the experience in onsen or ryokans. That why not try to come back to the facility, the ryokan onsen, early evening. When you stay at the hotel, just enjoy throughout the day and go to bed at the comfortable hotel. But especially to maximize the experience in onsen, they are made to enjoy in their facility and have enjoy the bath onsen for an hour or more, and enjoy the dining with sake and dive into the bed directly. So just a tip to enjoy those expensive onsens. There's another question.
Great. Yeah, Miguel, do you have a question?
No, it was just going back to your offer to share like secret spots. I mean, I was you'd mentioning your time in Shikoku resonated with me because I visited Kagawa Prefecture for the first time like trips ago. I learned about olive gyue, which was apparently like quite the delicacy where the cows are fed olives. But I rented a car when I visited Shikoku, and I don't know if screen share is enabled, but I ended up visiting this this Game Boy mailbox that is like deep in the Shikoku forest.
Wow.
That's sort of like, and the person who put the mailbox there actually still lives in the house that it's not. When you see that mailbox pop up on like social media, people mistake it for being an abandoned home, but it's not. But there's just so much in the rural areas that I guess like after doing trips in Tokyo and Kyoto, like by the third or fourth trip, I was really drawn to the rural areas. So I'm just sort of like endorsing going beyond the beaten path.
That's great.
Yeah,
it's I think many of us who've had the opportunity, the fortunate opportunity to travel around Japan have places that really kind of stick with us long after the trip is over. So really the goal of this program was to encourage people to get ready for encourage people to visit Japan. It's a great time to go and visit, and to give a few tips and suggestions about places that you can see that have been really special places in my experience. And it looks from the chat, it looks like a lot of people have other suggestions and things that they've done too. So hopefully we'll find an opportunity to do more programming like this in the future. So let me turn it back over to Dewan to kind of wrap up for today's program. And I want to say a big thank you to Kato-san for joining us and sharing your expertise. Hopefully we'll have a chance to travel with you too. So thank you.
Yes. I am quite amazed and appreciative that so many have a great interest to Japan, and yeah, I know we would be ready to travel. I know support your travel.
Thank you again, Kato-san. Thank you again, Steve. Yes, I posted in the chat, but if you guys could fill out that survey, that's helpful for us. We are thinking about making this a series. So if there's any questions that we didn't get, or if there's a topic that we didn't touch on, for example, if you or your family member wants to study abroad, or if you want something that focuses more maybe on pop culture like anime, manga, concerts, stuff like that, that would be the perfect opportunity to let us know. And then we could potentially make this a recurring series. For everyone who's asking about Japanese, again, check out our website. Maybe Kendra, if you can post the link, we offer Japanese classes, and it's okay if you don't live in the city. We have classes online. We have corporate classes, group classes, private lessons, classes in San Mateo, classes in San Francisco. So if you're trying to go to Japan and you want to pick up some Japanese, again, check that out. And again, I want to say thank Steve and Kato-san for giving a wonderful presentation today. I want to thank the chat for being so active. It was probably the most active chat we've ever had. I saw just nonstop questioning. So again, we appreciate the passion. And look out for end of June. We'll be working with Steve Baymel. We'll be on our website, sign up for our newsletter, but we will be doing a event with Japan Crafts 21 that we're excited. It's going to be on Japanese ceramics. So again, thank you everyone. Have a wonderful day, and we'll hope to see you again soon at a Japan Society event.
はい、ありがとうございました。
Thank you.
どうも。
Building bridges between the United States and Japan since 1905. Japan Society.